I watched through the crack in Melissa's bedroom door as she photographed my sketchbook again, her manicured fingers careful not to disturb the spiral binding. The lavender scent of her designer perfume mixed with the metallic taste of my fury. 3 years ago or 3 years from now, depending on how you counted time, I'd died homeless while she built luxe designs on my stolen creations. Not this time. The morning coffee ritual played out exactly as I remembered. Melissa humming off-key while copying my latest botanical jewelry designs onto her tablet, her silk pajamas catching the early sunlight streaming through our shared apartment's east window. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. She thought I was still asleep. Another breakthrough night, she murmured to herself, scrolling through photos of my work. The audacity sent ice through my veins. In my previous life, I'd confronted her about this moment, tears streaming down my face as she denied everything. This time, I bit my tongue and tasted copper. The trademark application notification chimed on my phone, the one I'd submitted at 3 a.m. for Melissa Hartwell Designs. She'd never seen it coming. My lips curved into a smile that would have terrified me in a mirror. "Morning, roomie!" Melissa's voice dripped with false sweetness as I shuffled into our kitchen, deliberately tangling my dark hair and squinting as if just awakened. The granite countertops still bore water rings from the glasses I'd strategically left out, small imperfections that would photograph well for evidence later. She clutched her tablet to her chest, exactly as she had before. "You're so lucky to be naturally creative." I stayed up all night trying to come up ideas for my portfolio review next week. The lie rolled off her tongue like honey mixed with poison. I nodded sympathetically, pouring coffee into my chipped ceramic mug while she drank from the designer tumbler I'd bought her for Christmas. "Maybe you should take a break from forcing it. Inspiration has to flow naturally." The irony wasn't lost on Mimi words from our first morning as roommates, back when I'd still believed in her friendship. Her relief was palpable as she edged closer to my sketchbook on the counter. "You're probably right. You always know exactly what to say." The manipulation felt like fingernails on a chalkboard, but I smiled and headed for the shower. Let her think she'd won round one. Steam from the shower masked the sound of my laptop keystrokes as I accessed the files I'd prepared in my previous life's final months. Screenshots, timestamps, digital forensics, evidence, everything I'd gathered too late to save myself the first time. The cursor blinked over the send button for an email to my patent attorney. Not yet. Timing was everything. My reflection in the fogged mirror looked exactly as it had 3 years ago. 24, hollow, cheeked from too much ramen and too little sleep. Dark circles under green eyes that had once sparkled with dreams. But behind those familiar features lurked knowledge that would have saved me then. The hidden camera I'd installed behind my jewelry box activated with a soft click. Every angle of my room was now monitored, every conversation recorded. Melissa's theft would be documented in 4K resolution. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the device, not from fear, but from anticipation. Through the bathroom door, I heard her phone buzzing with what I knew was a call from James Morrison, the venture capitalist who'd eventually fund her empire. In my previous life, she described him as some random investor who found my work online. The lie had cost me everything. Melissa's voice dropped to a whisper when she thought I was out jogging, but I'd only circled the block before slipping back through our apartment's side entrance. "She's so naive, James." "She actually believes we're friends." The cruel laughter that followed hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd expected it. The second time hearing your best friend mock your trust didn't hurt less. 3 more designs should be enough for the spring launch, she continued, pacing our living room in the Louboutin heels I'd watched her buy with her parents' money while I ate instant noodles for dinner. "The botanical collection will set us apart from every other jewelry startup. She'd never think to trademark anything too trusting, too stupid." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my hands clenched so tightly my nails drew blood from my palms. The smell of her expensive shampoo, the one I'd recommended, because it brought out the gold in her auburn hair, made my stomach turn. "What about after the launch?" James's voice crackled through her phone speaker. "She'll figure it out eventually." Melissa's pause stretched long enough for my heart to complete 3 thunderous beats. By then, she'll be out of money and out of options. Who's going to believe a broke art student over an established designer? James Morrison arrived exactly at 3 p.m., his silver Porsche growling to a stop outside our building. I watched from behind our gauze curtains as he strode across the courtyard, his Italian leather shoes clicking against wet pavement. In my previous life, I'd thought he was handsome salt and pepper hair, expensive cologne, predatory smile. Now I saw him for what he truly was, a shark who smelled blood in the water. "Darling," he greeted Melissa with a kiss that lingered too long, his hands gripping her waist possessively. She melted into him like butter on hot toast, all pretense of innocence evaporating. "Show me what the little bird has been creating." The casual cruelty in his voice made my teeth ache. They spread my sketches across our coffee table like generals planning a war, their fingers tracing my designs with clinical precision. "This one will photograph beautifully for the website." Melissa pointed to my moonstone pendant design. "And this collection screams high-end boutique." My life's work reduced to marketing talking points. "You're certain she won't be a problem?" James's question hung in the air between them. Melissa's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "She trusts me completely. Besides, even if she tried to fight back, what could she do? She doesn't have the money for lawyers or the connections to matter." The dismissal in her voice ignited something dangerous in my chest, a cold fire that would burn everything they'd built to the ground. My mother's voice through Melissa's phone call caught me off guard as I pretended to study in my room. "Sarah's always been the dreamer in the family. We appreciate you keeping an eye on her." The casual way she discussed me with my roommate sent chills down my spine. How long had they been talking behind my back? "She's lucky to have such practical friends," Mom continued, her voice carrying the same disappointment that had colored my childhood. "We worry she'll never make anything of herself with all that artsy nonsense. At least you understand the real world." Each word was a paper cut, small but accumulating into serious damage. Melissa's response was pure poison wrapped in concern. "I just want what's best for her." Maybe if she focused on something more stable. I'd heard variations of this conversation my entire life, but knowing my roommate was actively encouraging my family's doubts felt like betrayal on a molecular level. The call ended with plans for coffee, next week a meeting I now remembered from my previous life, where my mother had suggested I learn from Melissa's business sense. They'd been coordinating my emotional destruction for months. David's appearance at our apartment door shouldn't have surprised me in my previous life. I'd thought it was coincidence when he started dating Melissa 2 weeks after our breakup. Now I recognized it as the calculated move it had always been. His boyish smile and rumpled blonde hair had once made my heart flutter. Now they just made me nauseous. "Hey Sarah," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Is Mel home?" The casual nickname grated against my nerves like sandpaper. He'd never given me a pet name during our year together, claiming they were too sentimental. Apparently, he'd found his sentiment with my roommate. I watched from my bedroom as they embraced in our living room, his hands roaming territories that had once been mine. But it wasn't jealousy that twisted my stomach, it was the realization that he'd been reporting back to them about my emotional state, my financial struggles, my creative process. "She's working on something new," I heard him tell Melissa as they settled onto our couch. "Some kind of nature-inspired collection. She showed me a few sketches last week." The casual way he traded my secrets for her affection was almost impressive in its thoroughness. My ex-boyfriend, my roommate, my mother, they'd formed a coalition against me so complete I'd never seen it coming. This time would be different. The Spring Arts Festival application deadline approached like a guillotine, and Melissa's panic was almost musical. She'd spent 3 weeks trying to create original designs for the prestigious showcase, her sketchbook filled with disasters that looked like a third grader's art project. I sipped my morning coffee and watched her crumble with the satisfaction of someone settling an old debt. "I just can't seem to find my creative flow," she whined, her voice pitched to trigger my helpful instincts. In my previous life, I'd felt sorry for her and offered to collaborate a mistake that had cost me the festival's $50,000 grand prize and launched her career. This time, I offered only sympathetic nods while secretly documenting her artistic incompetence. The morning I found her photographing my hidden sketches, the ones I deliberately left in my desk drawer, my heart rate didn't even spike. She was so predictable, like a hamster running the same wheel. The infrared camera I'd installed captured every moment in perfect detail, including the timestamp proving she'd accessed my work without permission. "These are incredible," she breathed to herself, not knowing I was recording from my closet. "The festival judges will eat this up." She selected my 5 best pieces, including the cascade earrings that had taken me 3 months to perfect. In my previous timeline, Those designs had won her a standing ovation and a career-launching article in Design Weekly. Not anymore. I played my role to perfection when Melissa, reluctantly, showed me her festival submission the next morning. My face registered appropriate surprise, admiration, even a hint of envy, while knowing she'd stolen every line, every curve, every innovative detail from my secret collection. Her guilt was a thin veneer over her desperation, cracking just enough to show the panic underneath. "Wow, these are amazing," I lied, pouring honey into my voice. "I had no idea you were working on something so sophisticated." Her relief was pathetic as she launched into fabricated stories about her creative process, describing inspiration that had actually come from my late-night walks through the botanical gardens. When she asked me to help her practice her presentation, I agreed with the enthusiasm of a lamb walking to slaughter, except I was the wolf in this scenario. We spent hours perfecting her delivery while I mentally cataloged every false claim she planned to make about her work. Each lie would be evidence in the legal case I was building. The day before the festival, I handed her a good luck charm, small silver pendant I'd made with a hidden GPS tracker and audio recorder. "For confidence?" I told her, watching her eyes fill with tears at my generosity. She hugged me so tightly I could smell the fear sweat beneath her expensive perfume. If only she knew what confidence really looked like. While Melissa slept the night before her festival presentation, I uploaded every piece of evidence to a secure cloud server. Original sketches with dated timestamps, video footage of her theft, audio recordings of her conversations with James and David. Then I made copies and sent them to my lawyer, my insurance company, and a journalist friend who specialized in art fraud. The digital paper trail was bulletproof. The festival's copyright registration system was laughably easy to navigate when you had legitimate claim to the work. I filed official submissions for every design Melissa planned to present, complete with photographic evidence of my original sketches and witnesses who could verify their creation dates. By morning, I legally owned everything she thought would make her famous. My ace in the hole was the emergency injunction I'd filed with the festival's legal department, scheduled to be served exactly 30 minutes into Melissa's presentation. The irony was delicious. She'd be stopped mid-sentence while claiming credit for my creativity in front of the industry's most influential figures. The humiliation would be public, complete, and permanent. I also sent anonymous tips to 3 art bloggers who'd been following festival plagiarism scandals, complete with side-by-side comparisons of Melissa's submission and my original work. They'd be watching her presentation with microscopes, ready to pounce on any inconsistencies in her story. She'd face a firing squad of questions she couldn't answer. Melissa's presentation began flawlessly, her voice steady as she described her creative journey to a rapt audience of gallery owners, collectors, and fashion magazines. I watched from the back of the auditorium, my phone buzzing with updates from my legal team. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. She had 27 minutes of glory left. The festival coordinator appeared at the edge of the stage at exactly 11:43 a.m., his face grim as he whispered something in Melissa's ear. I watched the color drain from her cheeks as she read the cease and desist order, her hands trembling so violently the papers rustled like autumn leaves. The audience's murmur grew from curious whispers to concerned chatter. "I'm sorry," she stammered into the microphone, "but there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. I could see it in the way her mouth twisted around the words. 3 art bloggers in the front row were already typing furiously on their phones, their cameras focused on her crumbling composure. Within an hour, Melissa Hartwell fraud was trending on social media. Videos of her stammering denial went viral alongside screenshots of my original sketches. James Morrison's phone call came during her breakdown in the festival's back hallway. I heard every word through the tracker I'd given her. "Fix this or you're done," he snarled before hanging up. Her empire was already cracking at the foundation. Melissa returned to our apartment that evening looking like she'd aged 5 years in 8 hours. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her confidence shattered into pieces sharp enough to cut. She found me making dinner as if nothing had happened, humming while I stirred pasta sauce that smelled like garlic and vindication. "Sarah," she began, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it, "I need to tell you something." The confession poured out of her like water from a broken dam: the theft, the partnership with James, the plans to steal my entire collection. Each admission was music to my ears, especially since I was recording every word. She dropped to her knees beside my chair, tears streaming down her face as she begged for forgiveness. I was scared. James promised me everything I'd ever wanted, and I was stupid enough to believe him. Please, you have to help me fix this. You're the only one who can verify that I had permission to use your designs. I set down my fork and looked at her with the patience of someone watching a particularly slow sunset. I'm sorry, I said, my voice steady as bedrock, but I can't lie for you. The hope died in her eyes like a candle in the wind. She'd expected my usual doormat behavior, my desperate need to please everyone around me. That Sarah had died 3 years ago in a cardboard box behind a convenience store. This Sarah played for keeps. James Morrison's visit to our apartment came exactly 72 hours after the festival disaster, his silver Porsche gleaming with menace under the streetlights. I watched from my bedroom window as he paced outside our building, his phone pressed to his ear like a weapon. The predator had come to clean up his mess, just as I'd known he would. This time I was ready for his particular brand of intimidation. You stupid little bitch. His voice carried through our thin walls as he cornered Melissa in our living room. The verbal abuse that followed was worse than I remembered threats disguised as business advice, manipulation wrapped in false concern. In my previous life, I'd hidden in my room while he destroyed her psyche. Now I sat calmly at my desk, recording every word while sketching new designs for the collection that would bury them both. The plan they hatched was as predictable as it was desperate. Pin the blame entirely on me. According to their new narrative, I was an unstable roommate who'd fabricated evidence of theft after Melissa had graciously tried to help me improve my amateur work. They'd claim I'd stolen from her, then filed false legal complaints when my obvious plagiarism was discovered. The gaslighting was professional grade. She'll crack under pressure, James assured Melissa, his confidence toxic and absolute. Nobody will believe a broke art student over an established designer with proper legal representation. We'll destroy her credibility and sue her for defamation. I smiled as I added his threats to my growing evidence file. Rich men always assumed their money could rewrite reality. He was about to learn otherwise. The lawsuit arrived via certified mail on a Wednesday morning, thick as a novel and twice as damaging to my previous life's peace of mind. This time, I read through the accusations with the detachment of someone watching a poorly written drama, claims of theft, defamation, interference with business relationships, and demands for $500,000 in damages. The letterhead belonged to Morrison, Associates James's family firm. The conflict of interest was almost laughably obvious. Melissa played her role as the wounded victim with Academy Award precision, tearfully describing to anyone who'd listen how I'd betrayed her trust and stolen her life's work. She'd perfected the art of public manipulation, posting Instagram stories that painted me as an envious roommate driven to destruction by my own failures. The comment section became a feeding frenzy of strangers calling for my head. The university's art department summoned me for a disciplinary hearing, their faces grave as they presented screenshots of social media posts and copies of legal documents. These are serious allegations. Professor Martinez said, her voice heavy with disappointment I'd grown accustomed to hearing. We have to suspend you pending investigation. In my previous life, this moment had broken me. Now it felt like liberation from pretending to care about their opinions. My bank account couldn't survive the legal fees. James's team was generating every motion, every filing, every aggressive letter designed to drain my resources and force a settlement. They were counting on my poverty to end the fight before it really began. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 months liquidating assets from my previous life through cryptocurrency and offshore accounts I'd never told anyone about. Let them bleed me dry on paper, while my real war chest remained hidden. My new legal team came from the most feared intellectual property firm in the city, their reputation for destroying corporate thieves legendary in design circles. The retainer alone would have bankrupted the old me, but I paid it with the satisfaction of someone investing in the apocalypse. Ellen Rodriguez, the lead attorney, smiled like a shark when I showed her my evidence files. This is going to be fun, she said, and I believed her. The countersuit we filed was a work of art in itself. Fraud, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of federal copyright law. We demanded not just monetary damages, but complete destruction of everything they'd built on my stolen work. The discovery process would force them to reveal every financial detail of their empire, every communication between conspirators, every lie they'd told to investors and customers. My stroke of genius was the anonymous website I launched, The Real Story Behind Luxe Designs, complete with time-stamped evidence, expert analysis of the stolen work, and a growing collection of testimonials from other designers who'd been victimized by similar schemes. The site crashed 3 times in its first week from traffic overload. Justice had gone viral. The trademark application I'd filed for Melissa Hartwell Designs was approved with shocking speed, giving me legal ownership of her entire brand identity. She couldn't use her own name commercially without my permission, a irony so perfect it felt like divine intervention. Her lawyers scrambled to challenge the filing, but I'd done my homework. Every legal requirement had been met with surgical precision. James Morrison's investor meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, the conference room filled with venture capitalists who'd been promised the next big thing in luxury design. I watched through the building's lobby windows as he paced nervously, checking his phone every 30 seconds for updates from his legal team. The updates weren't coming because his lawyers were too busy putting out fires to return calls. The presentation fell apart before it began. 3 major investors had already withdrawn based on the fraud allegations swirling around Luxe Designs, their lawyers advising against association with potential criminal activity. The remaining backers sat stone-faced as James stumbled through explanations that satisfied no one. His carefully crafted empire of stolen dreams was dissolving in real time. Melissa's breakdown came during her emergency meeting with the Spring Arts Festival Committee, her voice cracking as she tried to explain why every design in her submission matched sketches in my possession. The committee chair was unmoved by her tears, his voice cold as winter steel. "Miss Hartwell, we're not just removing you from this year's festival. You're banned for life." The industry connections she'd killed for were cutting her loose like a toxic limb. By evening, 3 major fashion blogs had picked up the story, their headlines brutal in their simplicity. Rising Designers' Empire Built on Theft, the Luxe Designs Fraud Scandal, and my personal favorite, How One Student Exposed Fashion's Biggest Lie. The comment sections were digital execution chambers, thousands of strangers calling for justice with the fury of a mob who'd discovered they'd been sold fake goods. The knock on our apartment door came at 2 a.m., desperate and rhythmic like a dying heartbeat. Melissa stood in our hallway wearing yesterday's clothes and tomorrow's despair, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. "They've frozen my accounts?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from hours of panic. "James won't return my calls. The festival wants to sue me for fraud. I don't know what to do." She collapsed onto our couch like a marionette with cut strings, her hands shaking as she scrolled through news articles about her downfall. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed, the words tumbling out between broken breaths. James said it would be simple, just a few designs to get started. But then investors wanted more, and clients expected innovation, and I couldn't stop stealing because I couldn't create anything myself. The confession was everything I'd dreamed of in my previous life's final moments, complete, detailed, and self-incriminating. She described every theft, every lie, every moment of betrayal with the precision of someone unburdening themselves before execution. I sat quietly in my chair, occasionally offering tissues while my hidden recording devices captured every word for posterity. "You can stop this," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that we were collaborating, that I had permission. Please, Sarah, I'll give you half of everything, the company, the profits, the recognition. We can be partners for real this time." The offer was exactly what she'd promised in my previous life, right before she'd betrayed me again. This time, I didn't even pretend to consider it. David's return to my life came disguised as concern, his familiar cologne mixing with the morning coffee smell as he sat across from me at our favorite cafe. The same booth where he'd broken up with me in my previous life, claiming he needed space to grow. Now he leaned forward with practiced sincerity, his blue eyes swimming with crocodile tears. "I made a mistake, Sarah. Losing you was the biggest regret of my life." The reconciliation speech was poetry in its predictability. He'd been confused, manipulated by Melissa, blinded by ambition. He painted himself as another victim of her schemes, an innocent man led astray by a beautiful woman's lies. "She used me to get close to your work," he claimed, his hand reaching across the table to touch mine. I was just another tool in her arsenal. The performance was flawless except for the micro-expressions I'd learned to read in my previous life, the slight tightening around his eyes when he lied, the way his left hand twitched when he was nervous about being caught. His proposal was brazen in its scope. We'd get back together, present a united front against Melissa and James, and split the settlement money when the lawsuit's resolved. "Think about it," he said, his voice dropping to the intimate register that had once made my heart flutter. "We could travel, start fresh somewhere new, build something beautiful together." The same promises he'd made before stealing my sketches for Melissa's first collection. I let him hold my hand across the table, let him see hope flicker in my eyes like a candle in the wind. "I've missed you," I whispered, playing the role of the broken girl desperate for love and validation. Inside, I was calculating the exact moment his betrayal would become public knowledge. The revenge would be sweeter for letting him think he'd won me back before destroying everything he thought he could gain. The reconciliation played out like a romantic movie written by sociopaths, complete with candlelit dinners and weekend getaways funded by David's family money. I submitted to his touches with the patience of someone defusing a bomb, letting him believe my guard had lowered while secretly documenting every conversation, every plan, every admission of guilt he made while thinking I was lost in post-romantic bliss. His apartment became my second stage as I played the grateful girlfriend, cooking his favorite meals while he mansplained legal strategy and business development. "We need to be smart about this," he'd say, pacing his living room like a general planning invasion. "Melissa's finished, but James has connections. We need to position ourselves as the real victims here." The irony was lost on him completely. The nights were the hardest part of my performance, lying beside him while he slept peacefully, his breath steady with the confidence of someone who thought he'd outmaneuvered fate itself. I'd stare at the ceiling and remember dying alone while he built a life with my stolen work, then reach for my phone to document another day's worth of evidence. The audio recordings of his admissions would destroy him in court. My family's reaction to our reunion was predictably supportive, my mother practically glowing as she welcomed David back into the fold. "You two belong together?" She gushed over Sunday dinner, her approval warming him like sunshine. She had no idea she was celebrating the man who'd help orchestrate my professional destruction, or that I was recording every endorsement for the character assassination I was planning. The call from my lawyer came on a Tuesday afternoon while David was making lunch plans for us. His voice animated as he described a new restaurant we had to try. Ellen Rodriguez's words cut through his chatter like a sword through silk. "Sarah, we've uncovered something extraordinary. Your great-aunt's estate has finally cleared probate." I'd forgotten about Eleanor Blackwell, the eccentric artist who died when I was 16, leaving behind rumors of hidden wealth and sealed legal documents. The inheritance was staggering: $47 million in art assets, real estate holdings across 3 countries, and controlling interest in a foundation that supported emerging artists. But the real treasure was her private art collection, featuring works by masters whose signatures alone were worth more than Melissa's entire stolen empire. I'd been living in poverty while sitting on one of the world's greatest undiscovered art fortunes. Eleanor's letter, sealed for 8 years per her will's instructions, revealed the final twist that made everything click into place. She'd been watching my work since college, secretly purchasing pieces through intermediaries and documenting my artistic development. "You have the gift," she'd written in spidery handwriting. "But more importantly, you have the character to wield it responsibly. Use this inheritance to build something worthy of our family name." The Foundation's board had been waiting for me to claim my birthright, their patience rewarded when I walked into their Manhattan offices with proof of identity and legal documentation. The conference room fell silent as I revealed my plans: a comprehensive legal assault on art theft, a scholarship program for victimized designers, and a public database tracking stolen creative work. The Blackwell Foundation would become a war machine against artistic parasites. David's face, when I told him about the inheritance, was a masterclass in human greed, his eyes lighting up with calculations I could practically see spinning behind his pupils. "This changes everything," he breathed, his hands already reaching for me with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. "We need to be strategic about this windfall. There are tax implications, investment opportunities, estate planning considerations." The man who'd betrayed me for pocket change was salivating over generational wealth. I let him plan our future for exactly 1 week, watching him quit his job and research luxury properties while I finalized the legal documentation that would destroy him. His excitement was pathetic as he described the life we'd build: penthouse apartments, European vacations, a design empire that would make Melissa's stolen dreams look like amateur hour. Every word was evidence of his mercenary motives. The evening I revealed my true intentions. We were sitting in his apartment's living room, surrounded by real estate brochures and investment portfolios he'd prepared for our financial future. "There's something you should know," I said, my voice steady as a heartbeat. "I've known about your betrayal since the day I came back to life." The confusion in his eyes was beautiful as he processed the impossibility of my words. The revelation that I'd been reborn, that I'd lived through their betrayals once before, that I'd spent months building an inescapable trap for everyone who destroyed Mate, broke something fundamental in his understanding of reality. "That's impossible," he whispered, but the evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations he didn't remember having. Documents that proved I'd known about his schemes before they happened. Legal maneuvers that required foreknowledge of their every move. The Blackwell Foundation's inaugural press conference was held in the Metropolitan Museum's Modern Art Wing, surrounded by authentic masterpieces that dwarfed anything Melissa had ever created or stolen. Media representatives from major networks filled the auditorium as I stood behind the podium, wearing my great-aunt's emerald necklace worth more than most people's houses. The transformation from broke art student to arts patron was complete. "Today we declare war on artistic theft," I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The Blackwell Foundation will use every legal and financial resource at our disposal to protect creative work and destroy those who profit from stolen dreams." The journalists scribbled furiously as I detailed our first targets: Lux Designs, Morrison, Associates, and everyone who'd participated in their fraud. The Foundation's legal team had grown to 12 attorneys, specializing in different aspects of intellectual property law, their combined expertise worth more per hour than most people earned in a year. They'd filed simultaneous lawsuits in federal court, state court, and international trademark tribunals, creating a legal web so complex that escape was impossible. James Morrison's family firm would be defending against attacks on 17 different fronts. The coup de grace was the documentary crew I'd hired to follow the entire case, their cameras capturing every moment of the Foundation's justice campaign. Stolen Dreams, the Blackwell Foundation story, would premiere at Sundance Film Festival, ensuring that Melissa's humiliation would be preserved in cinematic quality for generations. Her name would become synonymous with artistic fraud in art history textbooks. They came to me separately at first, like supplicants approaching an altar they'd spent years desecrating. Melissa arrived at the Foundation's offices on a rainy Thursday morning, her designer clothes replaced by thrift store finds that couldn't hide the weight she'd lost from stress. The security guards led her to conference room B3, smaller one, with no windows and uncomfortable chairs. I let her wait for an hour while I reviewed documents that didn't require my attention. James Morrison's entrance was more dramatic, his legal team trailing behind him like wounded soldiers retreating from battle. The man who'd once threatened to destroy me now spoke in measured tones about mutual resolution and avoiding unnecessary publicity. His silver hair had thinned visibly in the months since our war began, and his expensive suit couldn't disguise the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was watching. David's appearance surprised me with its timing. He'd apparently coordinated with the others, arriving just as the afternoon sun broke through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd finally learned to work together, united in their desperation to escape the consequences of their own actions. He wore the same cologne that had once made my heart race, now mixing with the fear sweat that had become his permanent accessory. My mother's presence completed the gathering, her disappointed expression familiar from a lifetime of being her greatest regret. She'd flown in from Phoenix specifically for this meeting, her voice already prepared with the lectures about forgiveness and family that had shaped my childhood. "Sweetheart," she began, but I raised my hand for silence. This was my courtroom now, and I would control every word spoken within its walls. Melissa's confession poured out like water from a broken dam, her words tumbling over each other in their desperate rush to escape. "I was wrong about everything," she sobbed, her mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. "I was scared and stupid and jealous of your talent. I convinced myself that I deserved success more than you did, that I was just evening the playing field. The explanation was everything I'd dreamed of hearing in my previous life, now delivered too late to matter. She detailed every theft, every lie, every moment of betrayal with the precision of someone confessing to a priest before execution. The botanical collection that launched her career, the moonstone pieces that had graced magazine covers, the signature techniques that critics had praised as revolutionary innovation, all stolen from late-night sketching sessions she'd observed through hidden cameras and careful reconnaissance. "I never created anything original," she admitted. "Everything good came from you." James's apology was couched in legal language and business terminology, his lawyer's training evident in every carefully chosen word. "I made poor investment decisions based on incomplete information," he said, avoiding direct admission of fraud while acknowledging significant errors in judgment. He spoke of reputation damage and financial losses as if they were natural disasters rather than consequences of deliberate criminal action. David's contrition was the most pathetic, his voice cracking like a teenager's as he begged for forgiveness. "I loved you," he claimed, his blue eyes swimming with tears that might have been genuine. "I just got caught up in the excitement of success, the promise of money and recognition. I thought I could have both you and the life Melissa was offering. I was selfish and cruel and stupid." The performance was Oscar-worthy in its emotional manipulation. They came prepared with offers that revealed just how desperate their situation had become. Melissa proposed transferring full ownership of Lux Designs to me, along with all associated assets, client lists, and intellectual property rights. "You built this company," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You deserve to own what you created." The irony that she was offering me my own stolen work wasn't lost on anyone in the room. James's financial proposal was breathtaking in its scope. $50 million in damages, transfer of his art collection worth another $30 million, and public statements taking full responsibility for the fraud scheme. His law firm would fund a scholarship program in my name, and he'd personally testify against anyone else involved in similar schemes. The man who'd once dismissed me as a broke art student was offering to bankrupt himself for my forgiveness. David's offering was more personal, a complete confession to law enforcement, testimony against his co-conspirators, and a public apology that would destroy any remaining shreds of his reputation. "I'll tell everyone exactly what I did," he promised, his hands clasped in front of him like a prayer. "I'll make sure the whole world knows you were the victim and I was the predator." The role reversal was complete, the predator, begging mercy from his former prey. My mother's contribution was an emotional appeal wrapped in maternal authority. "You've proven your point, sweetheart. Everyone knows you were wronged and they're paying the price. But this vendetta is consuming you, turning you into someone I don't recognize. Your father and I just want our daughter back." The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable, positioning my quest for justice as a character flaw that disappointed my family. I let their words hang in the air like smoke from a dying fire, my silence stretching long enough for desperation to bloom in their eyes. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady as bedrock, carrying no anger or emotion, just the finality of a judge delivering sentence. "No," I said, the single syllable falling into the room like a stone into still water. "The time for apologies was 3 years ago, when I died homeless while you built empires on my stolen work," I continued, my gaze moving from face to face around the conference table. "You had every opportunity to choose differently, to treat me with basic human decency, to acknowledge my contributions. Instead, you chose cruelty, theft, and betrayal. These are the consequences of those choices." Melissa's breakdown was immediate and complete, her sobs echoing off the conference room's hardwood walls. "Please," she begged, dropping to her knees beside my chair. "I'll do anything to make this right. I'll disappear, change my name, never work in design again, just make it stop." The sight of her groveling should have satisfied some dark part of my soul, but I felt only the calm satisfaction of a completed equation. "I'm not interested in your money, your apologies, or your promises," I said, standing to look down at their broken faces. "I'm interested in justice, and justice doesn't negotiate with thieves." The Foundation's security team stepped forward at my signal, their presence a not-so-subtle reminder that this meeting was over. "You'll receive your final legal notices tomorrow. I suggest you use the time to prepare for what's coming." As they filed out of the conference room like defeated generals leaving a surrender ceremony, I felt the weight of 3 years' worth of planning and patience settling into satisfaction. The rain against the windows matched the tears on their faces, and for a moment I allowed myself to savor the poetry of their destruction. They'd taken everything from me on now. I was returning the favor with interest. My mother lingered at the door, her disappointment radiating like heat from a furnace. "I don't know who you've become," she said, her voice heavy with the judgment that had shaped my childhood. "This isn't the daughter I raised." I met her gaze without flinching, my voice gentle but immovable. "The daughter you raised died in an alley 3 years ago. I'm someone else entirely." The security footage would capture their exit for posterity. Melissa stumbling through the lobby like a broken doll, James Morrison's shoulders hunched in defeat, David casting desperate looks over his shoulder as if hoping I might call him back. My mother walked with the rigid posture of someone carrying a burden too heavy to bear. None of them would ever see me again. Alone in the conference room, I opened the folder containing the final phase of my revenge. Criminal referrals to federal prosecutors, civil suits that would drain their remaining assets, and media campaigns that would ensure their names became synonymous with artistic fraud. The Blackwell Foundation would continue its work long after their individual destructions were complete, protecting future artists from the fate I'd suffered in my previous life. 6 months after the final court judgment, I stood on the terrace of my Malibu estate, watching the Pacific Ocean paint itself in shades of copper and gold as the sun touched the horizon. The Blackwell Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams, its influence spreading across continents as we dismantled art theft rings and supported emerging creators. The ocean breeze carried the scent of jasmine from my garden, mixing with the salt air to create a perfume that spoke of freedom and new beginnings. The criminal trials had concluded with prison sentences that felt almost anticlimactic after years of legal warfare. Melissa served 18 months for fraud and intellectual property theft, James Morrison faced 5 years for conspiracy and racketeering, and David received a lighter sentence in exchange for his cooperation with federal investigators. My mother had stopped calling after the verdicts were announced, her silence a gift I hadn't known I needed. The art world had embraced the Foundation's mission with an enthusiasm that surprised even me. Museums worldwide now featured galleries dedicated to theft prevention and artist protection, their walls lined with recovered works and stories of justice served. My great-aunt's collection formed the centerpiece of the program, her masterpieces finally sharing space with pieces from artists she'd inspired and protected from beyond the grave. The documentary about our legal campaign had won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked congressional hearings on intellectual property reform. Stolen Dreams played in film schools and law schools, becoming required viewing for anyone studying creative rights or corporate malfeasance. Melissa's name would forever be associated with one of the most thoroughly documented cases of artistic betrayal in modern history. My private studio occupied the estate's east wing, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering unobstructed views of the Pacific, while I worked on designs that would never again be stolen or appropriated. The space was a temple to creation, filled with tools and materials I'd only dreamed of affording in my previous life. Each piece I completed carried the weight of my journey from victim to victor, from poverty to power, from theft to triumph. The Foundation's artist residency program had attracted talent from around the world, their studios scattered across the estate's 10 acres like jewels in a crown. I'd walk among them in the evenings, offering advice and encouragement while breathing in the creative energy that hummed through the air like electricity. These artists would never face the betrayal I'd endured. The Foundation's legal team ensured their work was protected from the moment stylists touched tablet. My new collection, titled Phoenix Rising, had debuted at the Venice Biennale to critical acclaim that felt surreal after years of watching others claim credit for my creativity. The pieces told the story of rebirth and revenge without explicitly naming the villains who'd made them necessary. Art critics called it transformative and emotionally devastating, their reviews reading like love letters to the journey I'd survived. Teaching had become an unexpected passion. My masterclasses at the Foundation's Education Center, drawing students who'd traveled from continents away to learn from someone who'd faced artistic death and returned stronger. "Protect your work," I'd tell them during our sessions, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned the lesson the hardest way possible. "Trust carefully, document everything, and never apologize for demanding credit for your creations." The nightmares had finally stopped visiting my sleep, replaced by dreams of color and light that reflected the peace I'd built in the waking world. My bedroom's ocean view helped with the transition. the sound of waves against the cliffs below providing a lullaby that had taken months to appreciate. The girl who died homeless and forgotten felt like a character from a tragic novel I'd once read rather than a life I'd actually lived. Relationships remained complicated, my trust damaged in ways that might never fully heal. But the estate's staff had become a chosen family of sorts, their loyalty purchased not with money but with respect and fair treatment. Maria, my housekeeper, had become confidante and friend, her gentle presence a reminder that not everyone was motivated by greed or jealousy. Her grandchildren played in my gardens, their laughter a sound I'd forgotten could bring joy. The Foundation's annual gala had evolved into the art world's most prestigious event, its guest list reading like a who's who of creative talent and cultural influence. Standing at the podium each year to present awards to artists who'd overcome their own betrayals felt like closing a circle that had been broken in my previous life. Each speech was a small act of healing, proof that survival was possible and justice was worth fighting for. Therapy had been Ellen Rodriguez's suggestion, her practical mind recognizing that legal victory alone couldn't heal the emotional wounds I carried. Dr. Sarah Chen became my guide through the labyrinth of trauma and recovery, her office a safe space where I could finally grieve the innocent girl I'd been before betrayal, taught me that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. The work was harder than any legal battle I'd fought. The Blackwell Foundation's influence had grown beyond art protection into broader cultural preservation, our legal team now tackling music piracy, literary plagiarism, and digital content theft. The original mission had spawned a movement, with satellite organizations operating in 12 countries and legislation bearing my great-aunt's name protecting creators across 5 continents. What began as personal revenge had become institutional change. My autobiography, Reborn, a story of art, betrayal, and ultimate justice, had topped bestseller lists in 4 languages. Its proceeds funding scholarship programs for artists from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. The book tour had been emotionally exhausting but cathartic, each interview a chance to warn other creators about the predators who lurked in collaborative spaces. Publishers reported that intellectual property law books were selling at unprecedented rates. The global artist protection database we'd created had prevented thousands of thefts before they occurred. Its AI-powered monitoring system flagging suspicious similarities between works and alerting creators to potential infringement. Tech companies now licensed our algorithms to protect their platforms from copyright violation, the same systems that had documented my own stolen work now safeguarding millions of creators worldwide. Melissa's name had become shorthand for artistic betrayal in creative circles, her story taught in business ethics courses as a cautionary tale about the long-term consequences of intellectual property theft. James Morrison's law firm had dissolved in disgrace, its remaining partners struggling to rebuild careers tainted by association with fraud. David worked at a coffee shop in Portland, his computer science degree worthless after his conviction for conspiracy to commit theft. Evening meditation on the estate's clifftop pavilion had become my daily ritual, the Pacific sunset painting the sky in colors that reminded me of the botanical designs that had started everything. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same creativity they'd tried to steal had become the foundation for everything I'd built in this new life. Justice had a symmetry that satisfied something deep in my artistic soul. Letters from artists around the world filled my mailbox each week, their stories of protection and recovery proof that the Foundation's work had meaning beyond my personal vendetta. A teenager in Mumbai, whose digital art had been stolen, found justice through our legal aid program. A sculptor in Prague recovered his life's work from a gallery that had refused to pay commissions. Each victory felt like a small flame lit against the darkness of creative exploitation. The estate's guest cottage had been converted into a writing retreat, its walls lined with journals documenting the journey from death to rebirth that had brought me to this peaceful place. Someday, perhaps, I'd share the full truth about time travel and second chances, though I suspected most people would dismiss it as metaphor rather than reality. The evidence of my transformation spoke louder than any explanation could. As the sun dipped below the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in shades of forgiveness and new beginnings, I raised a glass of wine from my own vineyard, another dream made reality through justice and perseverance. The toast was silent but heartfelt, to Eleanor Blackwell, whose legacy had made everything possible, to the artists whose creativity deserved protection, and to the girl who died so that I could be reborn. The future stretched ahead like an empty canvas, waiting for whatever masterpiece I chose to create.